President Donald Trump has announced plans to rename the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, a move that could face logistical and diplomatic hurdles despite his intention to formalize the change within the United States. During his inaugural address, Trump reiterated his desire to rename the ocean basin, which is bordered by the United States Gulf Coast, Mexico's eastern states, and Cuba. The Gulf is a hub of economic activity, including fishing, maritime transport, and energy production, which Trump cited as reasons for the proposed renaming. Trump, a short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, because we do most of the work there, and it's ours. While Trump could issue an executive order to change the Gulf's name in United States government documents, other nations are under no obligation to adopt the new designation. Maritime naming conventions are not governed by a single international authority, although the International Hydrographic Organization works to standardize names and mediate disputes. Historically, unilateral name changes have led to tensions between countries. For example, the Persian Gulf versus Arabian Gulf. Iran and Saudi Arabia dispute the name of the water body separating them. Sea of Japan versus East Sea. Japan and South Korea have clashed over the name of the waters between their territories. South China Sea disputes. This body of water is variously known as the South China Sea, the West Philippine Sea, and the East Sea, depending on the country. In the United States, the Board on Geographic Names oversees standardization of geographic names across federal agencies. The board's policy discourages changes unless there is a compelling reason, emphasizing local use and acceptance. Renaming the Gulf of Mexico could create diplomatic rifts, particularly with Mexico and Cuba, who share the Gulf's borders and its economic resources. Furthermore, international recognition of such a name change is unlikely, as other nations would likely continue using Gulf of Mexico in global treaties, maps, and communications. Domestically, the renaming could provoke mixed reactions, with some viewing it as an assertion of U.S. dominance and others seeing it as unnecessary or symbolic. Ultimately, while the president has the authority to initiate the change within the U.S., achieving broader acceptance would require significant international consensus, a challenge historically fraught with contention. During a visit to North Carolina to survey recovery efforts from last year's Hurricane Helene, former President Donald Trump suggested sweeping changes to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, including a potential dismantling of the agency altogether. Trump, I'll be signing an executive order to begin fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA entirely. Frankly, FEMA has not done a good job. Criticizing FEMA's performance in disaster response, Trump proposed bypassing the agency entirely for future emergencies. Trump, rather than going through FEMA, aid will go directly through us. FEMA has been slow and bureaucratic. We're going to fix it or start fresh. Trump also advocated for greater state control over disaster management. Trump states should take care of disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes. It will cost less and be more efficient. FEMA hasn't delivered, and states are better equipped to respond quickly. While some Republican lawmakers backed Trump's stance, others called for reforms instead of elimination. Senator Thom Tillis, RNC, expressed gratitude for Trump's visit, but avoided endorsing the proposal to dismantle FEMA, instead highlighting past failures under the Biden administration. Senator Tommy Tuberville, R. supported the idea, saying governors could handle disaster responses more aggressively and effectively. Senator Susan Collins, R. Maine, acknowledged FEMA's shortcomings but argued for maintaining a federal-level agency to assist states during overwhelming disasters. Collins states can't always handle these situations alone. An oversight hearing or reforms are needed based on what we've heard. Trump has long been critical of FEMA, accusing the agency of inefficiency and mismanagement during disaster responses. While campaigning, he blamed Democrats for misusing FEMA funds, a claim based on a mischaracterization of federal budgeting. Trump's criticism resurfaced earlier this month following wildfires in Southern California. He alleged FEMA was underfunded and ineffective, further politicizing the agency by tying disaster aid to unrelated policy demands, including voter ID laws and water management reforms. To abolish FEMA, Trump would need congressional approval under the Presidential Reorganization Act, which allows the executive branch to consolidate or eliminate federal agencies. However, Congress has not granted this authority since the Reagan administration, and similar restructuring proposals from former President Obama were rejected in 2012. As debates continue over FEMA's future, Trump's remarks have sparked intense discussion on the balance between federal and state responsibilities in disaster management and the agency's role in responding to national emergencies. As the Trump administration ramps up its immigration enforcement efforts, a new obstacle has emerged. The Mexican government refused to allow a U.S. military plane to land on Thursday, disrupting plans to deport immigrants to Mexico. This move underscores the rising tensions between the two nations over President Donald Trump's immigration policies. Two U.S. Air Force C-17 planes, each carrying approximately 80 deportees bound for Guatemala, successfully departed the U.S. on Thursday night. However, a third flight scheduled to transport deportees to Mexico never took off due to Mexico's refusal to grant access. The exact reason behind Mexico's decision remains unclear, but relations have been strained since President Trump took office. Trump has repeatedly criticized Mexico over immigration issues, and even threatened to impose a 25% tariff on Mexican goods if the country fails to curb migrant crossings. While these tariffs have not been implemented, they have added to the growing tension. A White House official described the situation as an administrative issue that was quickly rectified. However, the Mexican embassy did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's administration has openly criticized Trump's unilateral approach to immigration enforcement, including the reinstatement of the controversial Remain in Mexico policy. This policy requires asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while their claims are processed, a stance that has been met with resistance from Mexican authorities. Flying deportees to a foreign country necessitates the consent and cooperation of that nation's government, which Mexico declined to provide in this instance. This blocked flight is part of a larger effort by the Trump administration to crack down on illegal immigration. In his first week in office, Trump signed executive orders aimed at strengthening border security and expediting deportations. In addition to using military aircraft for deportation flights, Trump has deployed an additional 1,500 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border to bolster security. This latest incident adds to the mounting challenges in U.S.-Mexico relations, as both countries navigate complex issues around immigration, trade, and bilateral cooperation. The Trump administration is ramping up efforts to carry out what it calls the largest deportation operation in U.S. history, with plans to use military aircraft daily to transport migrants, according to President Donald Trump and his border czar, Tom Homan. Homan revealed that shortly after Trump assumed office, the U.S. government utilized military aircraft for the first time to deport migrants, a practice that will now occur regularly. On Thursday, U.S. military planes reportedly flew over 150 migrants to Guatemala across two separate flights, but Homan emphasized that these flights are just one element of a larger strategy. Homan stated that Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) officers are no longer restricted to targeting specific groups, such as convicted criminals or public safety threats, as was the practice under the Biden administration. Instead, any of the estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. could now face arrest and deportation. If you're in the country illegally, you're on the table because it's not okay to violate the laws of this country, Homan said, adding that the administration's enforcement measures are prioritizing threats to public safety and national security. However, he noted that the scope of arrests will soon expand. As that aperture opens, there'll be more arrests nationwide, he said, suggesting that increased enforcement actions are imminent. Homan also suggested self-deportation as an alternative for those living in the U.S. without legal status. They should leave on their own, he said. In contrast, early in the Biden administration, then Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas had issued guidance advising against deportations for undocumented immigrants who posed no public safety threat, acknowledging that many had lived in the U.S. for generations and contributed to society. Homan countered that U.S. immigration laws passed by Congress mandate enforcement, and that those without legal status are violating those laws. The administration's intensified deportation strategy marks a significant shift in immigration enforcement policy, sparking debate over its impact and legality. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe for more updates.